We have Microsoft's New Year coming, which is not as for every normal human being. It's not 1st of January. It's 1st of July, which also happens to be my birthday. Microsoft placed their financial year on my birthday. Dario, do you want to say a few words what we should expect about the 1st of July?
Let's start off with those organizations that are closing off their contractual renewals coming June. Those of you that are closing off the year, this is a very engaged month of discussions and negotiations with Microsoft. My recommendation for those of you that are still negotiating is don't be intimidated by any type of threat that Microsoft puts on the table. They have become super aggressive in their approach on-time renewal and on potential penalties of non-on-time renewal dates. If you've received a email saying that if you not renew on time, then your EA contract or your terms and conditions will not be kept and you potentially will have a 3% cost increase on top of your negotiated prices. I can tell you that from experience, we haven't seen that take place. For those of you that think maybe it's specifically for you, no, it's a formal disclaimer that we're seeing cross regions. Yet, I haven't seen that come into effect, and we have taken a number of negotiations over the actual renewal period. Not that I'm recommending that you go over your on-time renewal, yet if it's a very large, complex, high-stake negotiation, remember that the pressure is not only on you, it is on the Microsoft team to renew on time as they are compensated for bringing that contract on time. Keep that in mind. Never get intimidated. If you've got a good plan and a good BATNA, best alternative to your negotiated agreement, then you'll be okay. Keep in mind as well one more fact regarding your renewal process, and that is around finalizing your legal terms and conditions. Don't leave that to the last minute. If you are negotiating your commercial terms or closing off on your commercial terms, don't negotiate in sequence. Many times you're so embedded in your commercial negotiations that you postpone the legal discussions. I recommend putting that in parallel, and you might even find that you can leverage certain legal concessions against commercial concessions. You need to be flexible in your negotiation thought process. It's not only about commercials, it's about mixing and matching commercials, legal, and tech and relationship into one cohesive strategy. What can we expect coming next year? I would almost say more of what we've seen this year, and that's around hardball negotiations around E3 and E3 components. Microsoft is continuing that push that we've seen, moving organizations from E3 or E3, E1, and all the Fs, fantastic Fs, trying to push everybody up the ladder. The holy grail is still E5 plus. Plus what? Plus Copilot. I don't think I'm saying anything that you don't know, at least for those that have negotiated this year. But those of you that are coming off 3 or 5 year agreements, coming next fiscal year, this message is for you. If you're on an E3 platform or profile plus add-ons, just be aware there's going to be a hardball, aggressive push to E5. And on top of that, a certain amount, not your entire organization, but a certain amount of Copilot adoption. Really key. Those of you that are on E5 and you continue on E5 and you're going to be adding on Copilot, then you can expect on average around a 50% price increase per user, depending on how wide you want to take this. You need to be aware economically that Copilot is going to drive up your overall IT/Microsoft budget considerably. You need to prepare for it. I'm not talking about good, bad, or ugly about Copilot. I'm into the economics and to the bottom line. You need to prepare finance. You need to maybe tweak your budget. If you're preparing your budget for 25, then you need to take into consideration potential percentage of your users that you will want to migrate to Copilot. And you need to take into consideration about a 50% increase per user that you attach Copilot to. If you're on an E3 and you're attaching Copilot, it's actually a much higher expense. Copilot has no tiers. It's a one price fits all, and it's relative to your overall cost. So if your cost for E3 is less than E5, then of course the corresponding price increase is going to be higher. For E3, prepare for that and prep your budget or adjust your budget as needed. Those of you that are coming off 3 or 5 year agreements and you had a decreasing discount structure, something that we've seen very often for organizations that adopted E5 3 or 5 years ago. This year, a lot of organizations came declining discount structure contracts as Microsoft was highly incentivizing E5 a few years ago. And part of that was to provide high discounts first year and then decreasing discounts and a low discount exiting the contract. Expect that the discount level that you're going to be negotiating from is going to be your exit discount, not your average or high watermark discount. And if you weren't that individual that negotiated your previous contract, then please learn your contract. One of the most important critical pieces of preparing is building up or understanding what that structure of the contract looked like, that historical view of your discounts, and then prepping for what if scenarios going forward, and everything that you know can be used as part of the negotiation strategy going forward. In addition, we'll continue to see an increase in Azure focus from Microsoft. Those of you that are not there yet, at least you'll see that the discussion is more around the Azure contracts as the budget and the overall spend on Microsoft has shifted drastically from EA's to Azure. We are seeing many organizations that their relative spend is 1 to 3, meaning Azure spend is 3x, 4x, 5x more than enterprise agreements. So you can also understand where the emphasis of Microsoft is going and the importance for Microsoft of growing the Azure business, because it's actually a more lucrative business. And that's where account teams are compensated on. That's where potential additional benefits can still be achieved. Take that into consideration. Try and consolidate negotiations. Having an EA negotiation and an Azure negotiation combined as one. It's really important going into fiscal year 25 for Microsoft, starting July, understanding that you have an overall spend with Microsoft. If today it's segmented between EA, Azure, unified support, and maybe some other bits and pieces, it's critical as negotiations are getting really tough, really complicated negotiations. You need to come as one company and combine those spends into one cohesive negotiation strategy. That means you need to build up your negotiation story on the 3 pillars of your main expenses. If you don't do that going into 25, you are losing substantial leverage. And this is learnings that we are taking from the last 12 to 18 months. Discounting on EAs is declining, getting really tough to negotiate. Small and mid-sized organizations are having a hard time negotiating, especially if they're not bringing something new to the table. Large organizations have still got leverage. I'm talking about 30, 40,000 user organizations. And Azure spend, Microsoft is entertaining discussions with organizations that are willing to commit 100, 150, 200, 300 million. The numbers compared to the past are huge. If you're bringing 2-3 million per year on Azure, it's not that interesting in general. Yet again, it goes back to understanding what is your specific importance to that specific account team that you're dealing with and in which geography you are negotiating. If you're negotiating a 3 million euro a year contract in France, you're not strategic. But if you are negotiating a 3 million euro Azure contract in Saudi, in Georgia, or whatever country in the Eastern Europe, that is strategic because you are in a so-called growth geography. Numbers have different importance based on which geography you're working from or your HQ is situated. Small Azure contracts, small EA contracts are getting tough to negotiate. You need to have really key leverage points. If you don't come with any leverage, and leverage is not only something new, it could be relationship, it could be some kind of competitive landscape. Yes, Microsoft still has competitors, or anything else, and there are multiple other negotiables that we can discuss, you're going to have a really tough time getting any kind of concessions. Unified support has grown in spend tremendously. Budgets have increased and value is flat. The reason being, for those of you that maybe are not acquainted with unified support pricing structure, it is a multi-tier pricing model based on your overall spend. What is your Azure spend? What is your EA spend? And then that's broken up into various buckets. Each bucket has a different percentage. As your Azure spend grows, as your EA spend grows, your unified support costs grow. Doesn't mean that you're getting more value. It just means that you're paying more. Going into next year, budgeting wise, please take that into consideration. Otherwise, you will be in a budget deficit. And that is a very, very difficult conversation to have with your finance. Let me leave you with another point for 25. We had an enterprise organization that renewed 3-4 months ago. And when they budgeted for this renewal, the individual that was budgeting forgot to take into account a very large reservation for 365 that took place a year before. They looked at the baseline spend, they looked at Azure, but that specific year, they had a huge reservation for a very large number of 365 E5 users. And the way that it was billed and it came through a different channel, it didn't come into that budget. It was like 400 or 500,000 K, and it wasn't in the budget. And when they came to the renewal, of course, those reservations turned into baseline renewal licenses, and the baseline cost was, of course, inclusive. The budget didn't include it. You can imagine what kind of damage that, first of all, caused that individual personally. It's not a good place to be. Now go find the budget from somewhere else. Budgets are becoming increasingly challenging to forecast due to reservations, fluctuations, true ups, Azure, EAs. It's a moving target and declining discounts. So please, part of that FY25 planning, budget. Be super careful on that. One of the things that I always recommend when we prepare for a negotiation is I want to see what that budget looks like and what that expenditure stream looks like from the organization's budget, and then what it looks like from Microsoft's budget. And then we try and play around. There are times when there are advantages to play that and move things around a bit. Take into consideration that last year, when was it, April, there were price increases. Various products went up at various percentage points, on average, just say 10, 12%. Don't forget that when you budget. Don't forget that when you negotiate. That's a crucial point. On the screen now, you'll see that if you are a dynamic 365 organization and you've got a substantial infrastructure using 365, huge double-digit price increases from 9 to 17%. Keep that in mind. That's going to drive your overall increase in costs.
Here's my question, Daniel. If my renewal is hypothetically 1st of November, and these prices go up on the 1st of October, is there anything I can do to avoid having to budget that in my renewal budget?
Absolutely. First of all, I always recommend getting an early start to the negotiations and fixing a specific price list. What you need to make sure is that when you start the negotiations and you get your first price quote, ask your reseller or Microsoft, depending who you're negotiating with, direct, indirect, there are different regions. Each region has a different channel structure. Ask to have in writing what price list is being used for the quotation. Is it going to be June, July, August, September, October price list? Have it fixed. And then make sure that as you go forward in good faith, that month's price list. If by chance prices go up during your negotiation period or Microsoft tries to move you to a new price list, be very assertive and use that good faith clause. As we are negotiating, we expect to continue with the initial price list. It's all based on relationship. And relationship to Microsoft is a very, very strong word, and they take it seriously. That's the only way to offset price increases during your term of negotiations. One more point is, I'm not saying anything new, but it's overlooked too often, just around Azure or cloud alternatives. I've said this for years, and I'll keep on saying it. Organizations are underestimating the ongoing and future costs of Azure drastically. There are two parts to it. One is cost optimization. Needless to say, you need to manage your cost on a monthly basis. Hopefully that's understood today and everybody's got that practice. And that's not FinOps. It's economic optimization on a monthly basis. So you have that in place. Yet organizations have chosen too often one hyperscaler or one cloud provider, causing substantial lock-in. I had a conversation today, a few hours ago, with an organization, and I could be very blunt, but I'm going to be very careful how I word myself. Those who know me know that I voice my opinion very strongly. They, over the last 3 years, have based everything, the entire future, on Azure. They had AWS. They not only migrated everything off AWS, they announced to Microsoft that everything in the future is going to be Azure. They have pre-promised growth without getting any kind of return on that promise or that roadmap in advance. And now, when they are negotiating a renewal, Microsoft is saying, but you've got a 90 million commit that you've got no alternative. They didn't exactly say it that way, but that's what they meant. Why do we need to provide you any kind of incentives? You're not going anywhere. Give us more than 90 million. Commit to 110, 120, then we'll have a discussion on what's that worth. So the 90 million that's already pre-planned because of consumption is worth nothing. 90 million is out the door. Now it's 120, 130, so let's commit more. And I know that there are complexities around technology and disciplines. I've been in the tech business for almost 30 years. Yet, you need to keep your eye on alternatives and competition all the time. Otherwise, you're missing out on the economic bottom line of your investments and you're losing out. And at a certain time, it's going to start hurting because budgets aren't endless and CFOs will start pushing back. Cloud is not on-prem. It's not hardware. You can't just continue with the same hardware without investing for 5 or 6 or 7 years if you've got a bad year. The light switch is on. You can't live in the dark. Just keep that in mind, just from a conversation I had earlier today. Very painful from a bottom line perspective.
Mohammed asked, can I add 1 unit of Dynamics on the 30th of September? Then in November, I will add all licenses to that subscription. It depends on what channel you're buying that from. This language rather applies to CSP. Enterprise agreements work differently. You lock the prices when you renew.
Assuming that the question is, can I lock in a price for 1 unit, and then if I need to increase or true up or reserve in the future, then I'll have that price fixed? Yes, absolutely. If you are looking to invest in future products and you don't know what that commit is going to look like, lock in at least one product. If it's an EA, of course, and then you locked in for the next 3 years, at least you've got price protection. One of the benefits of an EA.
Mohammed, just to confirm that that's under CSP. CSP subscriptions don't necessarily align to a specific 3 years. It's when you start the subscription. That's when your alignment date is. And of course, if you started before the price increase, then you will probably, as far as I understand, if you're on annual or 3-year subscriptions, you should be able to lock in the price. That's how they work anyway. It's on the monthly subscriptions, the price goes up every month. Could go up. I'm not saying it does. And we have a very quick question from Maxim. Is it possible to get a discount on Copilot?
No simple answer. It depends. On small commitments, and I'm talking hundreds of licenses, almost zero discount. Very, very challenging. Microsoft will open a discussion on Copilot discounts only for large commitments. And large commitments are in the thousands of user licenses. And even that, it's not those high-level discounts that you might be used to under an EA. If you are an EA customer, don't expect to get the same discount you got on your EA to get the same discount on Copilot. It's a separate negotiation. Yes, if you've got a large commitment on Copilot, absolutely negotiate that in parallel. There are benefits that you can bring to the table that can be cross-referenced between various products to drive that value going forward.
Thanks, Daryl. Can you negotiate Copilot licenses on a private equity level to cover multiple companies?
That's not a trivial question. Depending on the structure of your organization, I'm not sure if you're talking about a enterprise agreement with multiple affiliates. That's one structure that we can look at. And then is the commit going to be a total commit under one agreement, or are we looking at multiple entities under, just say, a CSP that are purchasing individually, but you want to combine the spend to leverage a discount structure for everyone individually. It's two different approaches. I can tell you that in general, it's easier to negotiate co-pilot discounts under an EA than under a CSP. And if it's multiple affiliates, you need to have the right structure in place in order to leverage the total spend. Always remember that when you negotiate, it's the same for Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, for all the large vendors out there. You are negotiating with the large organization, of course, but ultimately you're negotiating with individuals that have a budget. And if they don't see the money, and the money is going to go to other pockets within the company, they're not going to put in that extra effort. Remember that.
Thank you, everyone. Find Daryl on LinkedIn. Just search his name and check his posts, his events there, if you want to learn how to negotiate with technical companies. And we'll see you soon on our next event.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. Bye-bye.